In this video, we're going to understand how the President of India is elected. Now, the election of the President of India is not a simple and direct one. The reason I say that is because he or she is not elected by the people of the state directly, like how we elect other politicians such as the MPs and the MLAs. So, why the President cannot be elected by the people of the state? There is a reason behind it. In 1848, Louis Napoleon, who was elected as the head of the state by a direct vote of the people, he then overthrew the French Republic and claimed he was the emperor since he had been directly elected. So to avoid such monarchy system, the President of India is elected indirectly. Now let us understand what does this indirect mean through which the President of India is elected. First, we will have to look at the Constitution of India. Let me open it. Now let's search for Article 52. It says there shall be a President of India. Now let's navigate to Article 54. There you go. The Article 54 of the Constitution says, the President shall be elected by the members of an electoral college consisting of A. the elected members of both houses of parliament, and B. the elected members of the legislative assemblies of the states and union territories, that is Delhi and Pondicherry. Now I have to explain few things here. Clause A says, the elected members of both houses of the parliament. By this we mean the MPs, member of parliaments of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Then clause B says, the elected members of the legislative assemblies of the states and union territories. Here we are referring to the MLAs of states and union territories. However, you must remember this point that only Delhi and Pondicherry has legislative assemblies out of the 7 union territories that we have in India. Because you see, union territories come under the direct rule of the president. Unlike other union territories, Delhi and Pondicherry has been given partial statehood, and that is why it has its own elections, ministers, and a legislative assembly. So far we understood that the President of India is elected by an electoral college, and I have explained who are eligible and part of that electoral college. You and I, as a citizen of India, we get to vote for an MLA and an MP. Therefore, that makes the MLAs and MPs direct people's representative. So even if you don't like an MLA or an MP, and you have also not voted for them, they are still going to be our representatives. It is these elected representatives who then vote for the president. In other words, the president is chosen by the elected representatives. So you see, everything is still in the legal ambit. It's like we as a citizen choose the MPs and MLAs, and these MPs and MLAs knows their citizens' best interest, so any decision by them has to be assumed to be in national interest. Now I know many of you may think that's not the case always, but then that's the way it is supposed to be. Anyways, let's move ahead. All MPs and MLAs have a certain number of votes. However, there is some calculation involved in determining the value of votes for every MLA and MP. So how to find out the value of vote of an MLA? Well, you simply have to take the total population of a state, divided by number of elected MLAs of that state, and further divided by 1000. I'll take an example and show it to you. We'll take the state of Madhya Pradesh. Now we will find out the population of Madhya Pradesh. Just remember one thing, that the population data is taken from 1971 census and not the present 2011 census. So the total population of Madhya Pradesh in 1971 was 3,17,180, and the total number of MLA seats in Madhya Pradesh is 230. This count will be latest and not from 1971, okay? Let's apply the formula. Total population divided by total MLA seats. The quotient is 1,30,509.4782. Further, we will divide this by 1000. We'll get 130.50. Therefore, the value of vote of one MLA of Madhya Pradesh is 130. And if we have to find out the total value of votes by MLAs of Madhya Pradesh, then we will simply have to multiply 130 into 230, which is the total number of MLAs in Madhya Pradesh. So 130 into 230 is equal to 29,900. Similarly, total votes by MLAs of each state and the 2 union territories is calculated and summed up. Likewise, we will now find out the value of vote of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha MPs. This calculation goes like this. We will divide the total value of votes of all MLAs of the whole country divided by the total number of elected MPs in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So for this example's sake, I'm going to take the total value of votes of all MLAs of the whole country of the year 2012. So the total value of votes of all MLAs of the whole country in the year 2012 was 5,49,474. We now take this number divided by total number of MPs. We have 543 MPs in Lok Sabha and 233 in Rajya Sabha. So the sum total MPs are 776. Now after dividing, we get the value of vote of 1 MP, that is 708. So total value of votes of all MPs is 708 into 776, that is 5,49,408. So now we take this number, that is the total value of vote of all the MPs, and add it with the total value of vote of all the MLAs. So it's going to be 5,49,474 plus 5,49,408. That will give us 10,98,882. So these are the total votes to be casted for the presidential election. Now the presidential election follows a system called as the single transferable vote system. It is mentioned in Article 55(3). Now this system is different from the traditional ballot system, and that's what makes it a little complicated. But stick along, you'll understand this system in a better way. According to this single transferable vote system, each voter gives his or her preference for the presidential candidate. Suppose there are 4 candidates. The voter will give 4 preferences. By the way, voter here are the MPs and MLAs. For example, let's say candidate C is your first preference. Then candidate A is your second preference. Like this, you will show your likeness in chronological order towards all the 4 candidates. And one thing to note is that it is mandatory to give a first preference, otherwise the vote will be declared invalid. However, if you just give one preference, even still the vote will be considered valid. Now things are not that simple as it looks. Simply casting votes or indicating preference is not enough, as the person with the most number of votes or first preference does not win the presidential election. The total number of valid votes decide how many votes will a candidate need in order to be declared winner. For example, candidate A gets, let's say, 5,250 votes. Then candidate B gets 4,800 votes. Then candidate C gets 2,700 votes. And last candidate D gets 2,250. Now if you add all the votes, you will see that there are 15,000 valid votes. Then what it means is that the winner requires 15,000 divided by 2 plus 1, which is equal to 7,501 votes to win in order to become the president. By the way, this 15,000 valid votes is the same number that we got after calculating total value votes of MLAs and MPs. I just took 15,000 as an example because it's easier to explain when compared to 10,98,882. So you just need to replace the numbers. I'm just taking 15,000 as an example. I hope so far it's clear. Remember, I've said that a person with the most number of votes or first preference does not win the presidential election. If you look at the table, candidate A has the maximum votes, that is 5,250. In a general election, candidate A would have clearly won the election. But in presidential election, that's not the case. Therefore, what happens is, candidate D will be the first one to be eliminated because of lowest number of votes. And I would like to pause you for a second, and I want you to look at this in a critical angle. If you look at candidate D's total vote count, it tells us something. It says 2,250 voters chose candidate D as their first preference. I hope what I just said makes sense. Now here is the twist. Understand this carefully. All these 2,250 voters for whom candidate D was their first preference, now what happens is, whoever these 2,250 voters chose as their second preference, all the 2,250 votes of candidate D will be immediately transferred to the remaining candidates, that is A, B and C respectively. Again, for example, let's say in these 2,250 ballot paper, the second preferences are recorded as follows. Let's say 300 voters gave candidate A as their second preference. Likewise, 1,050 voters chose candidate B as their second preference. And finally, 900 voters chose candidate C as their second preference. So you see, 300 plus 1050 plus 900 is equal to 2250. It is the total vote of candidate D who was eliminated in the first round. It has been successfully distributed among the remaining candidates. Now the new vote count of the remaining candidates will look like this. Now A has 5250 plus 300, that is 5550. Then B has 4800 plus 1050, that is 5850. And finally C has 2700 plus 900, that is equal to 3600. You see, candidate B is now leading. Now in the second round, candidate C will be eliminated. Why? Because C has the lowest vote count, that is 3600. Now again we'll repeat the process. Now what happens is, whoever these 3600 voters chose as their third preference, all the 3600 votes of candidate C will be transferred to the remaining candidates, that is A and B respectively. This time we used third preference because last round we used second preference. Suppose for example, let's say in these 3600 ballot paper, the third preferences are recorded as follows. Let's say 1700 voters chose candidate A as their third preference. Likewise, 1900 voters chose candidate B as their third preference. Now the new vote count of the remaining candidates after second round will look like this. Now A has 5550 plus 1700, that is 7250. And B has 5850 plus 1900, that is 7750. Now clearly we can see that candidate B has crossed the threshold mark of 7501 votes. In other words, candidate B has secured the required quota of votes and it is no longer necessary to count the fourth preference. With this example, we have seen that in the beginning candidate A was leading, although B had secured less number of first preferences vote as compared to A, yet B is elected as the president. It clearly reveals that candidate B is preferred and supported by a numerically larger number of electors than A, and hence he is the one elected by a majority. This entire process doesn't look that simple, but theoretically it is very effective in order to maintain the neutrality of the head of state. Although Indian presidential elections involve actual voting by MPs and MLAs, but usually the ruling government votes for the candidate supported by their own party. I hope you have now understood the complex procedure behind India's presidential election. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.